And we're not live, but we're recording. Mark, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Caleb.
No problem. Happy to have you. So before we get into it, tell my audience a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What do you do?
Yeah. So I guess a real brief sketch is I've always been interested in politics. Like a lot of people in this space, I grew up in a conservative household. The 2016 election, the whole Trump phenomenon got me kind of interested into libertarianism. And I didn't to libertarianism like Ron Paul, like a lot of people. It was actually Austin Peterson, and then I was kind of like a normie libertarian for a while until I came across like the Mises Institute, Woods, Dave Smith, all these guys. And then 20 with the riots and with COVID, and I sort of evolved along with the likes of like Pete Quinones, Matt Erickson, these guys. I would say that I align, quote unquote, the post whatever, but as far as like how I label myself now, like I'm more of like the Adam Patrick camp, where I'm a post libertarian and that I used to be a libertarian. I'm not sure what exactly I am. I still like sympathize with a lot of like libertarian values and the philosophy and whatnot, but I'm not sure what I am. As far as like I have a Substack, I write, and then I also do a morning news show with 3 friends of mine on YouTube.
Well, when we're done here, to send me a link to those things, and I'll put them in the description so people can find you afterwards.
For sure.
Right. So we're doing a book club on multiculturalism and the politics of guilt towards a secular theocracy by Gottfried. This was it was the first Gottfried book I bought. It was not the first one I read. I bought this one and also got the audiobook to Vanishing to Listen, which I got through that one a lot faster. But it's a good book. Anybody listening, definitely check out Paul Gottfried's work. That guy is incredible.
Yeah. The reason I like this is the first one I read of his. And the reason I read this first is I remember listening to him on a Tom Woods episode, and he's been on with Tom Woods several times. Yeah. But Tom asked him like which book would he recommend that people read first, and he said Multiculturalism, even though Multiculturalism is number 2 in it's a 3-book series, right?
Yep. After liberalism, multiculturalism, and post-Marxist left, I think was one. Or Strange Death of Marxism. He has 2 books on Marxism. I can't remember which one's the third one.
Okay.
But these books these books are great, especially if you've read The Manchurian Revolution by Burnham, or if you've read The Virus of Enemies by Francis. He seems to really continue that kind of thread about the Manchurian elite, what happens, and he kind of goes through the after liberalism, kind of how democracy works in the Manchurian elite. This one's kind of on the whole multicultural ideas behind the Manchurian elite and how they perpetrate things, and there's a lot of great stuff in here. Like I think he's 100% right that the government is turned to a therapeutic state instead of a Manchurian elite. They really do offer reconciliation to people.
Right, and I have to admit, I've read both Machiavellians and Suicide of the West by Burnham, and I haven't read The Managerial Revolution, but I've heard like enough about it and like listened to different podcasts about it that I think I kind of grasped the concept. And as I was like reviewing this book, and thinking about the relation between the therapeutic state and like the managerial state, like I guess I wonder if they kind of just act hand in hand with each other. You know, like maybe the managerial state or the therapeutic state is like downstream from the managerial one.
Yeah. But so before we get into the book exactly, I wanted to find a few terms because it seems there some terms kind of thrown around a lot. So I wanted to find a few terms. So I wanted to find therapeutic state, reconciliation, that kind of stuff for anyone listening. So Gottfried described the therapeutic state as the replacement of traditional ethics with the opinions of psychological experts within the guise of aiding mental well-being. And then reconciliation is a Catholic term for after you go to confess and you get reconciliation for the sins you've confessed. And so it seems like one of the points he makes in the book is that so I'll draw out as a circle kind of thing or as a map kind of thing. So Martin Luther had the problem of scrupulosity, where this is behind me adding some things to the book as well. But there seemed to be an issue where Martin Luther rejected certs out of the issue of scrupulosity, where he could not figure out if he was saved or not, and so he had faith alone. You only know by your own faith you were saved. And it seems to be an issue with people now. Everyone kind of has a sense of guilt. If you read Suicide West by Burns, a lot about the liberal syndrome being built, liberalism and politics of guilt. Mm-hmm. Everyone has this guilt, and that they have to find some way to get rid of this guilt. And the state steps in and says, "Hey, you're not a bad person. You agree with us on everything we say. You support policy A, B, and C. You're anti-racist. You support all these things. You can't be bad." So they offer a form of secular reconciliation for the people of today, saying, "Hey, you're not a bad person. You agree with us on things, and only idiots and wrong people and evil people don't agree with us on things." What do you think of that whole summary, a little bit, the ideas?
Yeah, it's like we're running the system on guilt, and the way that you can get rid of this guilt is just abide by the principles set before you by the therapeutic state or the culture, which is dictated by the state. I know there's like an argument between the state downstream from culture or the other way around. I think they kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, I have an article on one, and I'm writing an article on the other view. And I guess like 2 years ago, I wrote an article saying why it's downstream of culture, and now I'm working on the opposite because I'm like, no, I really don't know. Like, they both kind of make sense, and so it's a really tricky.
Yeah, it's almost like a circular thing where they each kind of influence each other, and kind of like build and feed off of each other.
Yeah.
I was like in relation to that, there was like a graphic not too long ago on Twitter. I don't know if you saw this, and it was like a country or it was a map of the world, and it showed like which countries like ran their societies based off of shame, guilt, or fear. Did you see this?
I did not see that, but that sounds interesting.
So obviously the U.S. was off of guilt, and the only ones off of fear were like North Korea and like one other country in Africa, I think. And I was like thinking about this as I was thinking about this book. The thing with guilt is the reason that it's like more powerful maybe than running your society off of shame is because it's like ever present. Like with shame, like there are things in my past that like I'm ashamed of, but I was able to like build off of that and become a better person based off of that. Whereas if I'm living with ever present guilt, then I'm constantly having to like make reparations or ask for forgiveness for something, which is basically what our society does constantly.
It is. And it's the whole thing about like saying like, I have a debate with this lady constantly with Sel. She'll probably watch this when it comes out. And she's very big on like, the only way to have a more society is to have a strong amount of people who shame people for bad actions. I'm probably butchering how she would argue it, but she's very much in favor of like the Puritan style of shaming people and kicking people out of your communities for degenerate behavior. And my point is that same can only go so far before people just vote entirely against it. And the sexual revolution is the result of people rejecting the ideas of same. Puritan, everyone like Puritans say never made to the point where they said, "Fuck it, I'm gonna be a sexual degenerate, be proud of it." Yeah. And they wear that same like a badge of honor. And the problem with same is that it can only go so far if people just react negatively to it.
Yeah, true. Yeah, if we were actually more shame based and less guilt based, though, we'd probably have a lot less like tranny story hours in schools and libraries, right?
If the government was shaming us more, there'd probably be a faster retaliation to the government.
Yeah.
Maybe that's an argument. Maybe that's an argument you can make now, because I actually would agree with that one. But he gets into this book came out in 2002, and so there's a lot of things he writes about that were kind of indicative of, like, he seemed to get a lot right that was going forward in 2010, specifically now, like cancel culture, all that kind of stuff. That I'm reading, like, this sounds like cancel culture, and sounds like everybody going about in the 2010s and today. He got a lot right in predicting it, and he seems to draw. Cancel culture seems to be born out of, philosophy speaking, Puritanism and progressivism being born out of Protestantism. And the structures of it all seem to come out of the post-World War II Germany, when the Allies kind of created new German states. The German states seem to have very strict laws about freedom of speech. It's not really being a thing if you try to support Nazism again. It seemed to have a lot of the institutional ways of cancel culture seem to be born out of what happened in post-World War II Germany.
Yeah, you see this a lot, or you hear this a lot by like liberals and such when like the debate over Confederate statues comes up. And they're like, well, Germany basically banned like all of their like old Nazi memorabilia and statues and the insignia and everything. and that was the right thing for them to do. But if you actually look at like Germany's society right now, like they don't even know who they are. And I have like my bet is that they would actually have a better understanding of like mistakes that may have been made during the Nazi regime if they actually have that history to look at. This is, I mean, I am actually sympathetic. I mean, I think you are too. You're sympathetic to the Confederacy in many ways. And so there's like many reasons why I am against Confederate statues being torn down. But even if we wanted to learn from mistakes of that society, if you want to pose it in that frame, like it's better to have those up than to tear them down, because again, you're living in guilt and you don't know what you're supposed to ask for forgiveness for until you turn on the television.
There's nothing worse for society than the idea of like secret knowledge that people just like aren't supposed to know, because then people are going to want to know. Once they find it out, doesn't matter what it is, they're going to latch on to that because it makes them feel special because they know the secret knowledge, and that is just never good for the society or any institution to have.
The forbidden fruit
books, exactly. Forbidden fruits are bad. My hot take: forbidden fruits are bad. Sorry, God. But there's he brings up a lot of point that some reason Christians are blamed for Nazis. It seems like they kind of like they downplay how many Christians were actually killed by Nazis in favor of bringing up other people who were killed by Nazis in an effort to really make Christians feel the guilt for Nazism. Like there's this weird thing about how they have to find the worst thing that happened in the 20th century. Okay, the majority of the population now holds responsibility for the actions of one nation, and we can use that to control this population to do whatever we want because we can just guilt them out of existence.
And even like the this is kind of like where the managerial state comes in, because we kind of point to the Nazi regime as the worst thing that happened in the 20th century. But what happens before World War II, like you had the rise of fascism, you had the rise of communism in the 1920s, 1930s. And the managerial elite basically, so you had like the intellectual elite as well joined in, the journalist class, academic class, basically sided with communism over fascism, as far as like those two rising systems of governance. And I mean, you can make the case pretty well that communism was much, much worse, caused way more deaths than what fascism did, what Nazism did. And so it's kind of like that pick and choose thing that we still see today in today's society on smaller scales, but could possibly obviously lead to a much grander scale.
Yeah.
That's what you ignore. The therapeutic state will ignore the atrocities of the communism while
I wasn't with communism.
Fascism,
yeah. If it wasn't so evil, I'm still amazed by it, honestly. Like it's hard not to be impressed by how effective they are at things. I guess this is the biggest problem. We read into the left and really how the societies work and how the regime operates. You're like, that's effective. You can't deny how effective it is. It's
have you ever read any Ernst Jünger stuff?
I need to. It's on my list of books to read. Adam Patrick's trying to get me to read it somewhat.
Yeah, I actually haven't finished Uma's Will, which is what Adam is super big on. But his book Storm of Steel, which is basically just his account of his time as an officer in World War I with Germany, and it's like it might be one of the most anti-war books you'll read without him ever like, I guess, editorializing about his time. Like it's just basically the straight facts, and he's not like trying to sway you one way or another whether like this was right or wrong. But it's a really good read in that he talks about how he viewed his enemy or his enemies, and especially like the English. And he speaks about them in like the utmost respect. And it actually kind of convicted me because I'm constantly like harping on the left as my enemy and these people are insane and crazy. But like you said, like I do have an amount of respect for how they have been able to accomplish what they've accomplished. Yeah, and if you don't have that respect, like then you're not ever going to win. So
exactly. That's why I get so mad when people say Hitler was crazy or a madman or something. No, he knew what he was doing.
Sure.
These people who were evil, they knew what they were doing. There's nothing worse than someone who's bad and smart than like a crazy evil person goes out and mows people down the street is nowhere near as deadly or dangerous as a smart madman who's like smart and evil. Like it's I get. I think that's one of the things I picked up. I actually like Jordan. I still like Jordan Peterson for. He hammers home that point that I don't watch a lot of Jordan Peterson anymore because he's kind of cringe, but he hammered home the point to a lot of people that Hitler was smart and he knew what he was doing, and so did Stalin. And like that's something that people don't. You can hate the left, but you have to at least respect them a little bit to understand them. To at least not man. I mean,
oh yeah.
I'm not saying that right, but
No, that made sense.
Yeah, it's actually I would say winning Gottfried. There's something about him when you read him. Because he's an academic and he's in the academia situation. He's very good at bringing up books that are, the people behind. He's very good at pointing at the members of the intellectual class who are actually perpetrating things. Yeah. Like a lot of people talk about intellectual class as the power behind it. It's because you have to point at Harvard's asserts of the government. My point is that Woodrow Wilson was the first pope of the progressives, and that. Because Gottfried, we all know everyone agrees on this stuff, but no one really talks about who the names are besides maybe Leo Strauss. But Gottfried is great at bringing up the names in the books and everyone who kind of writes stuff that influences the next generation of the intellectual class. Which some of the books he listed here, I'm kind of like, I want to go read that book. I want to read some of the books that he listed. And this is I don't want to disagree with him, but I want to understand what is the ideology behind the intellectual class that is being perpetrated. And he's great at talking about that kind of concept.
Yeah, he's a great historian of the right. And he can write in kind of like a Burnham style in that he will distill all these thinkers on the right without like actually giving you his own opinion on them. So you're actually like getting like the straight facts. You're not necessarily getting how Gottfried necessarily feels about them. You listen to like podcast episodes, then you'll get a better grasp.
Yeah, I have his book. What was it called? The Great Purge, all about William F. Buckley. Purging people at the right. Yeah. That's a fun one. It's honestly the history of the National Review people purging the right is just like it's infuriating because it's like there's so many good people who were just canceled by right wing people, and it's just sound like you had geniuses like Samuel Francis canceled by the Nestor Souza, who was a schmuck. Like that guy's never said anything intelligent in his entire life, and he was here instead of Samuel Francis. It's infuriating. It's like they want to lose, and I think they kind of do.
Yeah, beautiful losers. I take back that he does hate the neocons. You can tell he hates the neocons, but when he's like talking about the differences between like Sam Francis or James Burnham, like I think Gottfried would probably. I mean, he would definitely align more with like Sam Francis, but he gets a lot out of like Burnhamite conservatism, which people try to like lump Burnham into like neocons too, which.
That's the only bad thing Burnham did was associate with William F. Buckley. That's my take. Like everything, I love Burnham. I absolutely like, my favorite book is Suicide of the West. That is like the best book I've ever read. It's incredible.
Yeah. I think Suicide of the West was actually like what's that?
I think I bring the book up every episode I've done. I reference that book all the time because it's so amazing and influential in my thinking.
So this gets us a little. This is steering us a little more off topic, but Suicide of the West. I agree with you. It's my favorite Burnham book that I've read. But it actually, like when he's going through the list of liberalism versus, does he call it conservatism in the book?
I can't remember what exactly. I think he does.
I'm reading this and I'm like, I think I disagree with my friends about even libertarianism being right wing. Like this, like that book even like got me out of that mold. And I was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
If libertarianism is
a strand of libertarianism, like the Hans Hermann Hoppe brand, that I think is good. But so much of the biggest problem with libertarianism is it is liberalism. It's like honestly, I love Mises. I think I have all his books, but except the book except liberalism. I won't buy that one.
That's the funny thing is, I found liberalism for like $5 at a used bookstore, and I also found Suicide of the West at that same bookstore. This is actually it's a bookstore called American Opinion, and there's like a bunch of like American Opinion bookstores like all across the country, and they were actually set up by the John Birch Society. And I have one that's like 5 minutes from my house. I go and like visit the lady who runs the place every now and then. She'll like
cool.
sit there and talk to me about politics for hours. But I started Suicide of the West first. And then I'm going to read liberalism after this, and then I'll just contrast the two. But after I finished Suicide of the West, I was like, I don't even know if I want to open this. So I haven't read liberalism either.
It's Yeah, like, it's weird because like one of my favorite people is Erich von Knut-Ledin. He was a 20th century Austrian nobleman who was a Thomist and a Catholic philosopher. Wrote a book on monarchy. Has like he's very very anti-aquatic. He even says we're not even the eyes of God we're not equal. Like he takes it all the way to the top, and he called himself an arts liberal. And I'm just like the 20th century it made sense to go by that term, but now reading that term when he refers to that nowadays, I'm like, oh, it's cringe.
Yeah,
it's cringe. But
I do think, and I definitely talk about just being anti-liberal all the time, but I mean, Gottfried is as right-wing as they come, and I have actually heard him in some of his episodes the episodes on the Cato Gottfried show. I don't know if you listen to him.
I do.
And he does call himself a liberal, and he wrote an article recently for Chronicles about even like democracy winning in Hungary with the victory of Viktor Orban.
Yeah.
So he, I like the way that Gottfried will be like, yeah, I mean, I'm anti-liberal in this sense, but as far as like the American like political culture goes, like I don't know if you would ever find like a completely non-illiberal America, if that makes sense.
No. One of my tweets, one of my takes is that democracy is only good when my side wins.
Yeah, for sure.
That's to be the position of all good right wingers. Is it's only good when my side wins. Anything so of that is leftism.
That's funny.
But
there is speaking about Gottfried, this is like a year ago, so I was like looking up my old tweets about things I've said about Gottfried. A year ago, he was like out running. Or no, he's out biking. Do you remember? Did you hear this about this?
I did hear the story, yeah.
And someone hit him, and I guess it broke like 8 of his ribs. And like Gottfried's like the ultimate Chad, and walked home like the remaining 3 miles of his bike ride with his broken ribs.
And they did a Tom Woods episode the next day. Like, what a Chad. He just like immediately hops on the next day and was telling Tom Woods about the accident. And it's like, yeah. I'm just like, this guy's old. He's not young. He's like a young guy.
80 years old,
He's 80 years old. And this like it's Chad. He's one of my favorite Tom Woods moments is him and Gottfried were doing a podcast, and they were talking about who was the guy who was up for as a head of the Department of Education. I can't remember his name. And he was the guy picked by the right to be the guy they put forward in the position, and he was an idiot. And Tom Woods went, "Did you ever read his dissertation on education?" I did. They both start giggling like schoolgirls, mocking this guy's dissertation. And it's like Gottfried has a very I don't know if he's Jewish or not, but he has a very Jewish laugh. He sounds like Cartman from South Park's impression of Jewish people, and it's just hilarious. He starts giggling about this guy's dissertation. I'm like, this is the most academic kind of thing I've ever listened to. I love it.
Yeah, I think that was that story is told in Vanishing Tradition. You've read that one, right? William J. Bennett, I believe, is the guy who was chosen over Bradford in the Reagan administration, and this is when Gottfried was in that administration as well. Have you ever heard Gottfried talk about his relationship with Rothbard?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that stood out to me, and which I think that he calls him a friend, right? He's like,
they will let us back and forth or make phone calls. They were close friends.
He said he was always concerned about Rothbard because Rothbard like did not take care of his body. He was like eating junk food all the time, like never exercised, never slept, all this stuff. And then the fact that Gottfried's out on a bike ride, I know I've heard of him talk about like jogging and stuff. I was like, this is really like the difference between libertarians and like people who are like strictly right wing.
It is. Oh my god, that is. Like, dude, Rothbard took such bad care of his house. Like it's ridiculous. Like
I'm not trying to shit on Rothbard. I love
Rothbard, but yeah. It's crazy some of my favorite intellectuals are fat. I mean, Thomas Aquinas, Murray Rothbard, just a chud, just that kind of physique. Yeah. One of my favorite Rothbard stories I ever heard was apparently it'd be like a Mises Institute event. It'd be like 3:00 in the morning, and he would just be like, "Let's go to Denny's," and everyone would follow him to Denny's at 3:00 in the morning just to continue the conversation. And he would like stand here like this, it's in his neck, and he would do it for like 10 minutes. He just forget he was doing it, and just stand up like this. And apparently, students who are like next to him would just be like, "Start doing that number 2." It was just, what's it about? Like these older these old intellectual types are just amazing. Like I love them all. Like Rothbard, Gottfried, these kind of people who are just good right wings like the 90s. There's something about their personalities is just infectiously fun. Like he doesn't talk, you laugh. It's like they know how to have a good time. I think it's because they're so used to losing that they just know how to have a good time along the way.
Yeah. Like to be on a fly on the wall, like listening to a Gottfried and Rothbard conversation would be amazing.
Would be amazing. I wish podcast came around sooner. I would have loved to see Rothbard and Gottfried do like. I have a feeling that if they were around when podcasts were around, there'd be like a monthly Rothbard Gottfried podcast, and that'd be incredible.
Yeah, that would be insane. But you're right, like about this book being prescient, like the fact that it was written in 2002. Like it's been a year since I like read it through completely, but I was like, this stuff is like happening. Well, obviously it's happening now, but it's like escalated to the point that he even like predicted it would.
It's something about like we read Gottfried's books and you read like Henry Francis, Gottfried, and Rothbard. They just like kind of magic scene ball or something. Like they can just get to like the I think they properly understood liberalism and the ideology of the left enough to kind of make predictions and get them right.
This is why I can read even like Burnham's like managerial or the Machiavellians and Suicide of the West, and those were written in what, the 50s, 40s, and they're still present today. So yeah, these guys are really good.
Yeah, I was at work with my my coworker, and I was at work with a coworker, and I was playing your book. Well, I played you frozen. You still there?
You keep cutting out on me.
There we go. Yeah, so do you. So it's storming outside, and so my internet is being a little finicky. But I think we're still recording and going. But I was at work and I was playing a chapter of Suicide of the West. I was playing a Suicide of the West an audiobook on my phone at work while I was in the truck, and my coworker he's also right wing. He's a Catholic like me, and he's listening to the book. He goes, "Who wrote this?" Like James Byrne. He's like, "When did he write this?" I'm like, I think it was like 46 or 56. It was. Sounded like it could have been written yesterday. I'm like, yeah, could have been written yesterday and it would still be accurate. Like it's just that spot on.
For sure.
But Gottfried does a great job of, I think, of tracing it back. Like he traces it back at least. I think at one point in the book he calls it a Protestant de-Reformation. And he does seem to do a good job of tracing things back to.
You cut out on me again.
Nope, and we're back. Okay. I think I'm saving all my hard drive here, so I should have the audio at least. But we'll keep going until it cuts out. We made this 30-minute mark, so I can at least put out a decent episode from this. But he does a good job of tracing it all back to the Protestant Reformation. And it's clear about how much you can trace back. Like if you read Rothbard's, Education, Free and Compulsory, he traces back the idea of state public schooling to Luther and Calvin, trying to compete with Catholic churches in their schooling. And they were petitioning kings to create counter schools where they would be in charge of the education. Like there's a lot of liberalism and the ideas of how they operate. Even in the attitude, the guilt, all of it can be traced back to the Protestant Reformation. This is not to say I think it was. Actually, I do think they were wrong to do it. The theology was wrong, but I understand. I had Protestant listeners convert to Catholicism. But here's a good job tracing it back, and it's crazy how much you can blame on Luther and Calvin, especially like when it comes to public schooling, the guilt, all of it can be really pinned on those two kind of people.
Yeah, for sure. Like, and I was telling you a little bit before we were recording, or whatever. Like, I grew up in a Protestant household. Like, all my family is still Protestant. And like, I mean, they're super conservative. We were gathered around, like, just talking about the complete degeneracy that's happening within like our schools these days and just society in general. And somehow the conversation kind of turned to religion and like Bible studies and stuff. And I was kind of like lamenting like all of my experiences at Bible studies because I could not like stand sitting in the circle around a table and reading like one verse. And it's like, so what did this verse mean to you? I was like, well, a barrier was obviously like torn down at some point where like we're actually like thinking that we can read like a scripture verse and like apply it to our lives as opposed to like using the context of like the scripture itself and all this stuff. And it's like that tearing down of barriers that led to, or that naturally kind of like leads to the tearing down of like borders and barriers within our own like families and homes and schools and such. So it definitely makes sense to trace it back that far to the Reformation. Absolutely. But like you said, like
I know some people, I'm not so I hold this view, but I definitely think it's a plausible view. Some people trace the modern moral relativism to sola scriptura, to where you can if you can translate the Bible yourself and be the arbiter of truth, why can't you apply it to everything else? And that the idea, like, so there's a lot of the woes of today's society can be traced back to Luther and Calvin. And I know I have friends who are strictly Lutheran, and we don't talk religion anymore. They when I was like Pentecostal Protestant, they would we'd all be talking. I find no problem. But then I became Catholic, and like we started talking, continued to talk, and like it's like being heated. Like, oh, we're not gonna do this anymore. We're gonna talk politics because like what's directly opposed now. So I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah. And then bringing up like the schools is obviously, I mean, an important point, because this is where like all of this stuff, like the painting, like the putting of like guilt on, like, especially, I mean, we'll say like, especially like white people right now, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're 6 years old and you're in school, like you are like taught to believe that you need to be guilty because of how you were born.
Yeah.
Because of the skin you were born with. And that's a really effective tool in like creating compliance, not only among white folk who like obviously don't want to go against the way culture's going, or they don't want to feel even more guilty for holding certain views that they hold, but it's also good for compliance for like the people who are being lifted up on like the multicultural pedestal, because they see that the state is working in their favor. So why not continue to use the state to get more favors thrown their way? And an example used in the book is like the gay movement. Like the state was, I mean, it was the state that really like utilized the propaganda to get like gay marriage legalized and all this stuff. And now we see this leading to, you know, a bunch of gay guys singing about like, we're going to take your kids on Zoom, right? And they're going to use state power to do it because it was their ally. Yeah, that was nuts.
I was like, the fact that they are now so comfortable in what their plans, and they have the power to do it, that they're openly talking and singing songs about it, is kind of just like disturbing. Yeah. Like it was. I felt safer and better when it was like you have to like go to the chat room to find it. But now that it's so public, it's like, this is less comforting. Like you would think, it's in the open, we can combat that. No, they're so confident it's in the open. Yeah, that's the scary part.
And then the even scarier part is the therapeutic state is going to ally with them, right?
Yeah, it's really excuse me. No, like putting guilt on children is absolutely terrible. And it's so weird. The same people who claim that religion is evil because it puts guilt on the children, the state does the exact same thing, except they don't offer any like form of reconciliation, or they offer any confession, or offer any of the sacraments to get rid of it. Besides, or vote our way and agree with us. It is
right. Like that's your penance, right? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like every ideology. So I get real mad when someone says, you shouldn't teach kids religion because it indoctrinates them. Like everyone is indoctrinated in something. I mean, we were indoctrinated to speak English by our parents. Everyone is indoctrinated into morals of their families. It's a pipe dream to believe that you could, unless you're going to remove all kids from, unless you're going to go, play the Republic and move all the kids from the society and raise them separately, what they're trying to do with public schools, I think. Me just had this great point actually that public schools destroy the family, and by separating the kids from the family, breed sexual degeneracy and neurosis. He was very anti-public school. Like he was great. And it's hard to disagree with him, honestly. Look at public school now. You look at drag queen story hours, and I saw a story about there was this pissed me off a lot. So this 14-year-old girl was given like a paper to read in school and memorize and read during class, and it was what it said was, it's not me, it's not you, it's me. I just don't like your cock. And it was like a breakup thing. And the girl was upset that she was like, they don't want to read it, obviously. So she told her mom, and the mom went to the student council, the school district, and they cut her mic for saying cock.
Oh,
And they
jeez.
said, "Man, you can't speak that kind of language in a public hall like this. It's disrespectful." And she yelled back, "They're like, what the fuck was my kid supposed to do?" Like she was like lost it on these people. Started yelling. Then they cut a mic and asked her to leave. And it's like, okay, all the people should be burned at the stake.
Yeah.
But it was just like, it's ridiculous. It's honestly so absurd. You it's like a Greek tragedy when it gets so sad you have to laugh at it.
Yeah.
We're at the point now we have to laugh at it. I can't not. You gotta laugh. It's nothing else to do. It's just
Yeah, I mean, that might be like, I guess we have seen some wins as far as like the parent teacher meetings goes, with some angry moms. But maybe one of like the next like effective tactic to use is to just like get up there and use all of your allotted time like reading the quote unquote literature that's being taught in these schools today. Like just read it word for word, and people are like, "Oh, that's grotesque." It's like, no, this is this is actually what's being taught.
If they can't hear, why should the kids be able to hear it? Yeah. It's ridiculous. Thank God I live in Florida. Like I am so glad that like I honestly I have a hard time. Like I hear these stories and I'm like, I'm so glad I live in Florida because I can't even imagine that happening anywhere in my state. And it doesn't happen in my state. It's illegal now.
Yeah.
But
there
is
nuts. I'm in Michigan. There's a story that came out recently about a Michigan school like providing a litter box for a kid who identified as a cat. I was like, I am so ashamed of my state right now. Yeah, so they put litter boxes in the bathroom for her because she identified as a cat.
Kill the teacher. And Minecraft. And Minecraft YouTube. This is me arguing that we should, play Minecraft PvP and not actually murder people. But Jesus Christ, wow, I shouldn't be shocked anymore. I really shouldn't be after all this time, but I'm still blown away at the depravity of these people. Like this is yeah.
Yeah, it's wild.
You broke me.
Yeah, like the only thing I can think of is like retributive justice. Like, so when people do this, like they need to be made examples of.
Yes.
Medieval style.
I think Portugal.
This is on YouTube. I'll just say it like that.
I think Portugal has, instead of is it Portugal? I can't remember what country it is, but instead of having prisons, they just do corporal punishment. And instead of sending you to prison, they're just like literally whip you, and they have a little
even if you're adult, they're just like,
yeah,
nice.
they just whip you. It's like okay, I mean it's faster, it's cheaper, it's easier, and they have a higher recidivisation rate than in U.S. prison. So I'm just saying the Portugal model seems pretty effective.
Yeah,
wow.
So I've been I've been working on like this like 4-part series on my Substack. Have you read the book Albion Seed?
I don't think so.
All right, so this is going to relate to like guilt versus shame. And actually, I want to ask like your Catholic expertise on this. So Albion Seed I reference this book all the time. It's a book about like the 4 British folkways that came and settled like colonial America. So you had like the Puritans, which obviously like the most well-known. You had the Puritans, the Quakers, the Virginians / Cavaliers, and then like the backcountry border folk who were like in North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, those areas. And so the first piece that I worked on was the Puritans. And one reason that I actually respect the Puritans is they were actually quite good at like gatekeeping their community back then.
Yes, they were.
And like if you didn't like abide by their community rules, like they're gonna toss you out, and I can respect that, especially as someone who is an appreciator of Hoppian communities and whatnot.
Same.
But their church services, what they would do for people who committed sins throughout the week, they would have them like stand up at the beginning of the service and like probably wear or either like say vocally what they did during the week, or like even wear a sign like saying like what sin that they did. And they had to like stand there and let people like look upon their sin, and this is their way of like being or like paying penance for their sin or whatnot. And so I'm like thinking about that. I was like, well, is that guilt or is that shame?
I'm gonna say that's shame because it's public. But I would see how guilt would be inspiring the actions of the individual to like admit to the same and go forward.
Yeah.
So they obviously feel a form of guilt, but the end result that is the same that is coming from the congregation. in the community. So I would say that's the same thing.
That makes so it's like, I don't want to do that again. Like, I don't want to stand in front of the entire congregation and wear a sign saying that I lusted after my neighbor's wife, so I won't be committing that sin again. It's really interesting, though.
There's definitely a thing in Catholic and Catholic church that when I go to confess it, it's just like saying the same shit every Sunday to the same guy. It's like he just looks at me like, "You gonna do better this time?" I'm like, "I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try, Father. I'm really." But it's there's nothing worse than saying the same thing every week. It's just embarrassing.
And even like, so I mean, we talked about how Protestantism, I struggle with that word so much, evolved into like what we have now. But even like, I guess if they were able to even do a better job of gatekeeping, that's better. Like, that form of Protestantism is better than like where it led to. Like, could they have stopped it from evolving? Is an interesting to look to. Like, at least they're doing this also in their church and not like trying to pay retribution to the state.
Like, I want to say that could work, but my thing is that how long does that go before people just wear like a bad, like they wear the sign as a badge of honor, like Sexual Revolution did, you know? So that's like that's the question, like how far can it go before it results in the revolt, you know? And that's one thing I do like about so pre-print Catholics were much more accepting of people's sins. As in, they're like, that guy cheats sometimes. Like, they were just accepting. They were more like, everyone's a sinner. We're all trying our best. They were much more accepting of people's mistakes, but not of a person as a whole. It's like, that guy's a good person, but he makes mistakes like everybody else. And so there was a level of like, there wasn't really shame for it. There was guilt behind it. They would go to confess and give a confession and then try again. There was I can't remember who it was. There was a nun who, when all the nuns were done, she'd walk out. She would always go last and confess, and the line confessing, and she'd walk out of the line and go, "We're done. Let's go sin again." And like, they just like admitted to like, we're gonna mess up again. It's gonna be fun. Let's just go sin some more. But there's a pre-twin Catholics and good Catholics have a acceptance of, okay, we're gonna make mistakes. There's like, who was, I can't remember who it was. Christopher West, the guy that's the Always Body, has a story about a priest who was a beautiful mess, and he took pride in the beauty that was his messes. Because he was just a absolutely mess of a person. Like, even after the school banned smoking, he was still smoking in class. He's that kind of guy. He picked up, I can't remember his name. He picked up the Pope before he was the Pope, when he was a cardinal, in his sedan from the airport. And he knew 2 weeks in advance he was going to be doing it, and he didn't want to do it, and he didn't clean the French fries out of the seat. And so Pope John Paul II had to swipe French fries out of the guy's seat to sit down. And the guy was just like accepting of who he was as a mess. And there's like a beautiful lesson in there. Like, he was trying to be better. He did make amends. He didn't make movements to getting better, but he accepted the mess. And there's something beautiful in that.
Yeah. Interesting.
God, it's gonna bug me if I'm gonna look up him after this and text and put in the link for anyone listening. I'll put a link to the story from Christopher West in the description, because everyone should listen to that, because it's a really, really good story.
Yeah. Do you so you said you finished the book. Going back to it, I thought one of the interesting like stories in there was when Bob Dole was running against Clinton in '96, and they asked something about like gay rights. Obviously, gay marriage wasn't legal then, but something even like about gay rights, and Bob Dole obviously didn't answer to the liking of the regime. And instead of like answering the question, Dole went on to do what stupid Republicans do and try to like explain or contextualize or whatever. And he's like, well, I didn't receive like great, I wasn't treated well as like a veteran or whatever. And so he tried to play the victimhood status himself. But what conservatives often or always like fail to realize is there is like the hierarchy of victimhood status. And like gays obviously were like way ahead or way more on top of like veterans back then, Vietnam veterans back then.
This is the one clever thing Steven Crowder ever said, was that we need to go out and find the black trans midget with scoliosis and crown him king. It was the only clever thing I think I've ever heard that guy say, but it was
then they would just try to find the left wing one, and then you lost, right? It's just like it's an ever losing battle for conservatives.
Same. They create a whole new victim class where he identifies as a cat.
Yeah. And it's like one thing that really stood out to me like 2020 leading to the 2020 election. Like 2016, the group that was like most quote unquote maligned by the Trump movement were Mexicans, right?
Mhm.
Like, because he said the thing about they're rapists, murderers, blah blah blah, all that stuff. Which I still don't know why that line was so controversial. But anyways,
I mean, he was the first people who brought him over. I mean, context mattered so much in that sentence.
Yeah.
And it was like, you know, one of my first real red pills on the media line. That was like I still a Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder guy. I think it was 2016. I was 16. My first time voting was for Trump, and so I was like just turned 18. I realized, oh, the media lies about things.
Yeah, for sure. But it's like, yeah. So that was the group that was supposedly like Trump was the most anti, right? And go into like 2020. Obviously, you have the summer of love of 2020, and leading into like that election, when talking about Trump being a racist, it was always like blacks over Mexicans, right? Like Mexicans were completely gone, and it's like Trump is racist against blacks, and I guess the proof was, I don't know, the 2020 riots or whatever, but
Black Lives Matter or something.
Yeah, and I mean that just shows you like the hierarchy of like victim, right? It's like blacks are ahead of Mexicans. Like, I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, it is weird. They seem to really pull this lesson away from post World War II Germany. They realized that they could, hey, if we can guilt the German people for the Nazi ancestors, we can make them do whatever we want. If we can find a way to guilt every white person, even if they immigrated here 2 years ago for slavery, we can make them do whatever we want.
Right.
And it's just like, I looked at my ancestry. Sadly, all my ancestors were Northern Yankees who fought on the northern side of the Confederacy. They're all from hell smiling, like they're all angry at me now, saying like, "Does that mean like my ancestors are smiling down upon me?" Mine are not. I think I'm disappointed in all of them. They were all Protestant, and they were all like one of my ancestors was a guy who voted for women's right to vote. So like they just all hate me now.
I have a lot of Quaker blood in me, which Quakers are like.
I love the Quakers. One of my favorite movies is Friendly Persuasions, because it's even though it gets the whole Civil War conflict wrong, because the South was marching towards the North and pillaging people, even though it was the North that raised the total war. The whole movie is a great story of the Quakers.
Yeah, there's a lot good about the Quakers. That's actually the group I'm working on now for my next Substack piece.
Nice.
So I have a lot of Quaker in me, but then my dad is like Irish Scot, and he's got a ton of like rebel blood in him. So I have like like the pacifist Quakers, but also some Confederate blood in me as well. So I'm all over the place.
Nice. We got 10 minutes left. Let's go into the final round of questions here. What part of the book was the most like, wow, he got that right? Like predicting forward. If you had a guess.
Man. Do you have an answer to this?
No. No. This page is blank. I took no notes.
No. I think he was really early on like the gay movement. Like we have to remember this was 2002.
Yeah.
And the culture was still obviously like not for gay marriage then. And he writes a lot about how they were using the state then to kind of like propagandize the populace. And I don't think he outright like predicted that gay marriage would be legalized within, well, when was it? 2015? Within
I think so.
15 years of the writing, but he basically like wrote that that's what would happen, and then that it would progress further from gay marriage. Like they wouldn't be content with just gay marriage, which is what the left always told us, right? Like, well, now we have the right to marry, so we'll leave everybody alone. Like, no, that's not how it
slope
happens.
is undefeated.
Right.
It's I think the thing he got most right is prediction wise was probably the gay people. Yeah, he talked about Justin Raimondo, which I found like cool. I always love when people bring up Justin Raimondo. I'm reading now Reclaiming the American Right by Raimondo. It's really good.
I've heard that.
I would say him and Ross McGrath to burn him a lot in the first chapter. And it's just like, don't. Actually, Nick would think about him though, is like he cared more for power than liberty, which is true. But he cared about power for liberty, but he always put power above liberty. What's in defensive, I think he's right to do so, honestly. I think there's a point where like you can't, if you make a trade-off, you've lost all your power. Like if it comes to arguing for liberty in the state, in the States, it's just like once you make one trade-off for liberty, you've lost all your power. Like you can't use it for that.
And as we see on Twitter these days, it's still a debate, argument over power versus liberty, right?
Yeah,
it's an ever-present debate.
So that was really my only question I had to ask about it. Back to Paul Gottfried as an author. He's written a lot of. Have you read any other Gottfried works?
So I read Vanishing Tradition, which he wrote the prologue and the epilogue, right?
Yeah.
And then that's a bunch of other like conservative writers in there. And then I also read
a lot of young guys.
Yeah,
it was interesting to kind of get really cool to see younger conservatives like Chronicle magazine. Like, okay, this is still good young conservative intellectuals working. They're just all dissidents now.
Yeah, Chronicles is great. And then I also read Revisions and Dissents, which is another book of essays, but it's all essays by him. And he has an essay in there about defining right and left, which is really good. I mean, it's not real long either to read, so you could probably like find it for free somewhere.
I'll probably check that out because I'm very big into like how to define right and left.
Yeah, and I started to read Fascism. I want to read both Fascism and Anti-Fascism by him.
Yeah, I need to read the Fascism one. I have an Audible token. I'll probably use it for that one.
Yeah.
How did he define right and left? Like, do you remember how he defined them and how he went about it?
Man, it was similar to like Rothbard's egalitarianism versus hierarchy definition. Like, if I were to like distill it down, I would probably say it was like right wing believes in hierarchy, and the left is all about egalitarianism. Like this.
I use hierarchy and egalitarianism and order and chaos. Of course, order and hierarchy, I think, are synonymous because this is the natural order. But
I like order and disorder, order and chaos as well. I also like to use the concept of borders, and you can define that as borders, as walls, or as like even boundaries, right? So you don't have a boundary between family and school, which means you're left wing. If you want to have a boundary between your family and school, like you are more right wing than left wing. And then obviously borders, like you actually believe in countries and like securing those borders. And then the whole wall thing, I really like Chesterton's like don't tear down a wall if you don't know the reason it was built there in the first place.
Yeah, Chesterton had a lot of really good. His writing is very hard to read, but he had a lot of great pithy quotes. Like this, I was listening to what was it? Orthodoxy? No, it wasn't before Orthodoxy. Heretics. Listening to Heretics by Chesterton, and he writes like a 19th century British person would write.
Yeah.
It's just very beautiful, but also like what is he saying? I don't know. But he'll say like one.
I gotta read that sentence 3 times. Yeah,
you catch the line, and you get the paragraph. Like, oh, that is a very like insightful, beautiful paragraph, and you go on to the next paragraph, and you lost it again. Like I think I'm listening to the same chapter like 4 times now. Each time I try to find a new paragraph that I catch and like, but it's so easy to get like he starts going off. It's easy just to drown him out because you don't know what's happening.
Yeah, but I've always wanted to read Chesterton's book on distributism as well. I don't know. I haven't like looked too much into distributism, but it's an interesting concept to me. Yeah. But also Gottfried's like writing style is very unique as well. Like he uses words where I'm like, I gotta look that up. Or like one thing I do like what Gottfried does is he'll like there's not a good English word for the term he's trying to use or term he's trying to define. So it'd be like there's a word in German that means this, and then like he'll like write out the German word and also the definition of it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, one thing I like about Gottfried is he's very good. A lot of authors I read are very American centric, American focused. He does a good job of incorporating other countries and European things and how the influence of it all. And I always enjoy reading that part because I don't know anything about any like part of any country outside of America. Like I don't have the time to like really study history besides like major events. And he's good at bringing up like this political event that happened in Europe in 2002 or something, and it's just like super helpful to kind of go, okay, so that happened and they influenced us here because the left is the regime isn't just the American institutions, it is the Western European NATO institutions, and so he's a good at introducing that kind of idea and really making you understand that kind of stuff. What's more like the more I'm like, yeah, this kind of has to be brought into my ideology. It has to be like understood because Crusader, how the left operates.
Yeah, and I like listening to him talk about World War I too. He's constantly saying, "I wish we would have fought on Germany's side," which I am sympathetic to that to that as well.
Yeah,
and if you read Hoppe, if Germany wins World War I, maybe we don't have a complete breakup of the monarchies.
Yeah, that is yeah. World War I is one of those. It was a quote from Eric von Kadut-Ledin. It was I don't want to butcher it. I tweeted it today. I'm just gonna find it real quick because I don't want to butcher it. For
you
the
must
average,
be reading him now, right?
I'm constantly reading him.
Okay.
He's one of those guys I'm listening to. I think I've listened to Monarchy and War like 8 times now. Every time I catch something new, he's incredible. Here's for the average person, all problems date to World War II. For the more informed, to World War I. For the genuine historian, to the French Revolution.
Oh, nice.
He's like one of his big things. He blamed everything on the French Revolution and Martin Luther. And so I really enjoy his work. But we are running out of time. Mark, where can people find you? What are your links? What are your plugs?
So on Substack, it's the Emergent, markmetz.substack.com. Also, you can find me on a show called The Morning After on YouTube, and it live streams every Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning at 8:30 Eastern. All of my other cohorts are working on the other time zone. I don't even want to mention its name, but 8:30 Eastern. You can check us out there. And in that show, we talk about current events. We'll talk about different articles every now and then. We're not sometimes we can be serious, but mainly we're just like 4 guys messing around, talking about the news, trying to make light of the news. So check us out there.
That's good. Well, everyone, this has been another episode of Faith, Liberty, and Praxis. This is season 2, episode 1, because I've labeled them the seasons for my own sanity, keeping track. Also, I can't stand when someone's like much I love Tom Woods, 2,000 episodes. It's hard. Like if you want to find an episode, it's so hard to find it. But if you have it by seasons, it's easier to go, oh, it's in this season, it was in this episode. It's easier to keep track of things. But anyway, like, comment, share, subscribe. You guys won't be seeing this for 2 weeks, so enjoy it in 2 weeks.